What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer with BamaOnLine.com. Mixing things up a little bit today for you. We got senior recruiting editor Andrew Bone here to recap the first scrimmage and kind of talk fall camp in general. Alabama held its first scrimmage of the preseason on Saturday, August 9th. Andrew, we're I think less than 20 days to kickoff now. So it's hot and heavy on us in terms of football season kicking off. But we're going to talk a little bit about the scrimmage, and then as the show progresses, we'll kind of give our overall thoughts on fall camp. But Alabama headed to Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday. I think 110 plays in full pads. No turnovers, no injuries. So a pretty clean day overall. We know a couple of guys like Jaden Roberts and James Smith were held out. That was just kind of precautionary. Didn't seem like it's anything serious with either of those. But I guess we'll start with the quarterbacks. Hearing from Coach DeBoer, he said a few touchdowns, no picks. He liked overall what he saw from the guys. It's kind of still status quo in terms of what we expect. But I know both of us had some nuggets on the message board. So I'll start off with you, just what you heard and maybe what you thought overall from what Coach DeBoer said and everything you were hearing.
Yeah, sounded like a lot of positive feedback from Coach DeBoer and different people who were out there throughout the day, watching the quarterbacks especially. And, it seemed like a lot of, positive feedback as far as, all of the guys, not just one. It wasn't like, there was a drop-off from Ty to Austin Mack or from Austin Mack to Keelan. So that's positive to hear. How's that order going to shake out over the course of the next, few weeks? I think we're going to just have to wait and see. And as we saw last week, I mean, they said they're hoping to name the starting quarterback by the end of the second scrimmage, or at least know who it's going to be. But and I know you'll talk about Ty a little bit, but from what I heard, Keelan had a really good day. And I'm not saying he's going to be the starting quarterback or anything like that, but from talking to some different people who were out there watching, and they felt like Ty was going to be the guy, but Keelan didn't look like an average freshman out there. Going up against the defense, looked really calm and control. Liked his mobility, him escaping the pocket, but still being accurate, with his throws. I mean, this is a guy who completed almost 70% of his passes as a high school senior. So you knew that he's an accurate quarterback heading in. And, he's kind of hit the ground running since he arrived in Tuscaloosa back in December. And I think you really have to like the progress that he's made. And I've talked about this before, but it reminds me so much of 2020 when Bryce Young came in as a true freshman, and you had Mac Jones, who had been kind of waiting in the wings, waiting his turn to be the starting quarterback. And Bryce pushed him. I mean, he pushed him to the brink, but Mac was able to win that job and held him off the rest of the season. But I think this is really good experience that Keelan's going to be that he has been receiving up to this point, and hopefully into the season, he's going to be able to get some reps and potentially, I don't want to say make an impact, but at least get ready for for what's to come in the future.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if we don't see all three quarterbacks at some point during the season. I'm not saying the first game against Florida State, but you want to get guys ready. You want to get them that exposure. I mean, Austin Mack only played in one game last year. And that's his only game up to this point. So, obviously your quarterback room is a little thinner from a scholarship standpoint. So getting all three of these guys ready is important. And kind of echoing what you've heard about Keelan Russell, it sounds like he has an innate ability to make wow play after wow play. Now, it needs to be more consistent. I think he could obviously learn more of the offense. Not saying that that's a deficiency in any way, but he's obviously going to be behind guys like Ty and Austin Mack who have been in the system longer. But yeah, I mean, it just sounds like he's a dude that can make plays, and you really want that from a young guy. And it sounds like he kind of lives up to that five-star hype, so to speak. But with Ty, yeah, I mean, he's a guy that he hasn't done anything to lose this job. I think he's had a strong grip, in terms of where he's at in the pecking order. And hearing how he performed on Saturday, I think he threw a couple touchdown passes. And the one I heard about the most, because I know you see how different people hear things. And we had subscribers on the BOL Roundtable, our message board over at BamaOnLine, talking about a touchdown pass to Isaiah Horton. And that did happen. It was a longer touchdown pass too. But the one that I heard the most about is like a scrambling play that he made to Jam Miller. And I think that was toward the end of the scrimmage, kind of just reminiscent of him in high school. I think people kind of sleep on Ty Simpson's mobility a little bit, but I think that was on full display. But I think Ty's kind of checked every box this offseason. He stepped up as more of a leader, and then he goes out and performs. He's been consistent. I know none of the quarterbacks have really turned the ball over in fall camp, but that's been something that Ty's done since the spring. So to continue that, I think, is big, especially when you kind of feel the pressure from those younger guys behind you. And you're right. So we're sitting here. This is Monday, August 11th. I imagine maybe this time next week we might be learning about when a starting quarterback is going to be named. If I had to guess, I think people, if you're Yay Alabama subscribers, you might know first. I think that's probably how they'll announce it. But that next Tuesday, we'll hear from Ryan Grubb. So it's kind of shaping up, kind of what they hoped and envisioned. You hope for no bumps in the road, but that's kind of the way it's playing out. But yeah, so maybe this time next week we'll be doing another show talking about a starting quarterback being named.
You sort of wonder, when they named Ty as the, heading into the season, from the spring to the summer, they said he would be QB1 if we were making that decision right now. And that may have lit a fire, under Austin Mack, under Keelan Russell, to push Ty even more, because they were going to be gunning for that QB1 spot. And, from talking to different people, I mean, Ty, has certainly, been great out there. But I think one thing that has really caught my eye is just his leadership skills from talking to different people at Media Day the other day. Ryan Williams brought it up. He said, a year ago, Ty didn't know when to speak up. He didn't know if it was his place to speak up to the team. Now he knows that. Now he wants to be the leader. He wants to break down the huddles. He wants to talk to the team. He wants to have connections, with all of his teammates. So I think that's been a really big, plus for Ty this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, that leadership, we heard about it in the spring, that he was kind of chosen to be on that leadership council. And that's a big part of it, kind of an overlooked part of it. But again, I think every box has kind of been checked by Ty Simpson so far. And I would be shocked if he's not named the starter next week. I think everybody would. But, I think, like you said, it does motivate the other guys. I think it says a lot that they stuck around even when that being said. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting fall from a QB standpoint. But there are other positions on this team. We are well aware of that. You got to get quarterback out of the way. That feels like a thing to do. But I mentioned the touchdown pass to Jam. It sounds like Jam Miller had a nice day on Saturday. It sounds like the run game was really strong out the gate. The defense kind of countered and responded. But whenever you go into this offseason, you kind of wonder how this running back pecking order is going to play out. But it sounds like 26, the senior coming back for this team, he's leading that charge. And they've got 4 quality backs right now that I think all could receive reps. They're not going to play all 4 of them, most likely, but you continue to hear Daniel Hill's name. Richard Young is still around, despite some people asking if he's still on the team. Dre Washington, the transfer from Louisiana, has made an impact. So I think the run game, to hear that it had a strong start is not only encouraging about the running back group, but also about the offensive line. And that's without Jaden Roberts, who is out with a minor injury. But I think you hear from the run game, you hear that Kalen DeBoer is very impressed with that group, the depth of that group. I think that's got to be, because we've talked so much about quarterbacks, wide receivers, everything else. It's almost like the running backs get forgotten a little bit, but that group seems to be rounding into form right now.
I think when you look at the offensive line, I mean, it's strength and power. I mean, you got some big bullies out there, and I think it was Parker Brailsford who said, they're the nasty boys. They're going to go out there and get, want to put guys in the dirt, and that really helps out the running back room. And I think we're going to see those guys get a lot more carries this year than we did a year ago. Obviously, Jalen Milroe was a big part of that rushing attack a year ago. So now Jam Miller having the performance that he had in the scrimmage, but also leading up to then, we've heard about him throughout the spring, but also throughout fall practice thus far. I mean, Daniel Hill, 240 plus pound guy. I mean, all these guys are just big physical running backs. They're all 220 pound plus. I think Washington, might be just a few pounds shorter or a few pounds lighter than that, but you've got some bell cows in that offensive backfield that can have great seasons, and really it puts a lot of pressure on the opposing defense, because you have a guy like Jam coming in there, and then you got to tackle this freight train coming in Daniel Hill. So we continue to hear a lot of positive things, but as you said, I mean, 4 running backs. Probably the deepest that Alabama's had in a while. Guys that can actually go out there and play and really contribute. So I think you got to have a lot of high expectations for this running back room. But Jam had a great scrimmage. Heard he had a pretty impressive run that just absolutely leveled one of the safeties. I didn't hear the name, and I don't know if wants it out there at all. And we had some subscribers on BOL that said, "Well, that's concerning that Jam Miller had a couple long runs in the game." No, it's not. I mean, you want your running backs, you want your offensive line to have success, not just your defensive side of the ball having success. We heard they turned it on a little bit, but hearing that Jam's able to rush and this offensive line getting a little bit of a push, I think that's you're playing against one of the best defensive fronts in college football this season. So if you can have some success against them, you should be able to have some success during the season.
A couple of things stick out to me when people kind of react that way. Is one, no James Smith. We know he's going to be a piece a key piece of that defensive front. But you also know in the context, is he going against the second team, the third team? It could be a third team safety that gets trucked by Jam Miller. That's probably going to happen on every day that ends in Y. So context is key, and it's one of the reasons that I try not to take too much away from everything you hear from the scrimmage, because you're not watching it with your own eyeballs. I trust what I see more than anything else. So hearing it, you got to trust the person that's relaying the information to you as well. But it's a situation where you don't always know the situation, the context, the down and distance, who they're going against. So good that safety remains anonymous. But speaking of the defensive backfield, or I guess the opposite of that, the wide receivers sounds like had, as you would expect, some big plays. Obviously, Ron Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton, that's your top 3. But we've heard about guys like Rico Scott, Jalen Hale throughout the preseason. But something like Cole Adams had a big day. And that's encouraging to hear both Jalen Hale and Cole Adams kind of back to where they were, not only last year for Cole, but 2 years ago for Jalen Hale, because he's missed quite a bit of time. But to hear that he's making plays, it shows not only a pat on the back to Jeff Allen and this medical staff, but it shows the depth of this receiving corps.
Yeah, it's not just depth; it's also trust. I mean, you're able to trust more than just 2 or 3 guys in your offense to make plays, on the outside or in the slot. I think Cole Adams, coming back, and Jalen Hill, seeing both of those guys back on the field has been great, because we saw what Jalen Hill, limited role that he was able to play as a freshman. I mean, he made some great catches, and when you saw that, you're like, man, this guy's going to be really good here in the future. And then we saw that last year with Cole Adams, making some plays early in the season, getting on the field, and we started seeing him be utilized a lot more. And then he suffered his injury, but now seeing those guys back, Cole seems like he's doing really well in fall practice. But it's going to be interesting with this wide receiver room, because, as you mentioned, you have those top 4 guys, and it seems like all 4 guys could be in the NFL, one day. But I think that Jerm has certainly been a guy that Ryan mentioned the other day as taking that leadership role in the classroom. And I talked to Bray Hubbard about it as well. He was the first guy that he mentioned was kind of the leader in that receiver room, and felt like he had kind of taken that next step as far as his game overall. So that's really encouraging. What Ryan can do, what Isaiah Horton can do, and Rico Scott having that 23.5 miles per hour run this offseason. I mean, I think you and I and everybody else is just waiting to see what he can do on the field this season.
Yeah, it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing, how many of these guys they can just get on the field, because it seems like they're 8, 9, maybe even 10 deep at that position, but they're not going to play all those guys. They just can't. So it's a good problem to have, but I'm fascinated to see how Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, Jamarcus Shepard, how they work that one out. And defensively, I didn't have too much in terms of the intel that I posted on the BOL message board, but it sounds like, well, one, no turnovers. This is a defense too. I think like if people are freaking out, like how are they not, picking off the ball or forcing fumbles? This is a defense that showed that they can do that last year. They were really good in terms of getting the ball off the other team. But then you also got to take into account, while Kalen DeBoer said some good things about the pass rush, the quarterbacks are in black jerseys, so it's a little bit different. But you had in your Nuggets, you had an interesting note on one linebacker. I'll kind of give you the floor on this one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Alabama has two returning linebackers in Justin Jefferson and Deontay Lawson, but one guy they brought in during during the transfer portal window was Nakai Hill-Green out of Colorado. And what's interesting about him is Alabama had actually reached out to him the first time he went into the portal back in 2024 to see if he would be interested in coming in, but he knew Alabama had starters returning in Lawson and Jahad Campbell. Wanted to go somewhere where he could play right away, and that's why he ended up going to Colorado. But then when he ended up not going into the NFL draft, decided to transfer from Colorado and ended up at Alabama. I mean, this is Alabama didn't want to go into the season with just two guys, with experience in the SEC at linebacker, and they were able to get somebody like Nakai to come in and hearing the reports from him this during fall practice has been good. But then talking to someone who was at practice at the scrimmage on Saturday, they said he was one of the best players out there on the defense side of the ball. Was very physical, absolutely leveled someone right at the line, one of the running backs right at the line of scrimmage. And as you say, you don't really know, if they were going up against the second team, it was the third team, fourth team, fifth team running back. But I think that's very encouraging. And, talking to the source that I spoke with, he said, this guy is going to be a difference maker for Alabama at the linebacker position. So being able to have a guy like that who can also move around, not just play on the interior, he can rush from the outside. He was a second team all Big 12 performer last season. So he's got a lot of experience under his belt. He's smart, and he's got I think he's certainly going to make an impact for Alabama at the linebacker position, but also somebody that you can trust out there to go out there and make plays.
I think obviously with Deontay Lawson coming back from the injury, it's good to have that, not only from a production standpoint, but just from an insurance standpoint. But talking to Deontay at SEC Media Days earlier this summer and asking about Nakai, he said like that's something they needed, just to add another experienced guy to that room, because beyond Deontay and beyond Justin Jefferson, it's first and second year players. And while they look good, they look $1 million on the field, they're still young. So to have that, I think, is big. And I think Deontay's been able to do quite a bit this preseason. He still has that brace on his knee, but that's to be expected. But I think even like just seeing some of the photos, like he's out there in the scrimmage, he might not be he's not playing 110 plays by any stretch of the imagination, but he's giving it a go. But to have an experienced guy like Nakai Hill-Green is huge for this linebacking core. And I wouldn't necessarily call him as we'll I'll pump the brakes here. I'm getting ahead of myself. I was going to say surprise, because we're going to talk about some surprise players from the preseason. But when you look at exiting scrimmage one, now going into week 3 of fall camp, what's maybe the biggest question for you still left out there? Because we've talked about quarterbacks. I think clearly that's still something, anytime the coaches talk about it, Blake and I are going to write about it from those press conferences. But outside of maybe quarterback, what's still the biggest question for you after this first scrimmage?
Well, I think it has to be tight end. The depth there. I mean, obviously they have depth there, but who's really going to come in and make an impact? Outside of Josh Cuevas, and Danny Lewis. Are we going to see more of Marshall Pritchett, who's had a good fall camp? I mean, this guy who missed most of the spring due to injury, but comes into to fall camp and has really received a lot of praise from the coaching staff. Does a guy like Caleb Edwards, who came in a little bit late, potentially get on the field? But you also have the two transfer tight ends, Brody Dalton and Jack Jack Samarco. I was trying to think of his last name, but are those guys? You also have Jay Lindsey. So who's going to be that second, third tight end, in Alabama's offense, because obviously Josh Cuevas is going to get most of the attention there. But I think those are the questions that we have. Once those guys, get back to 100%, who else is going to be out there to make an impact for Alabama at that position? That would probably be the I'm not as concerned about. We talked a lot about the right guard with Jaden Roberts and left guard with Dubé. I think they like where they're at there because they've got a lot of experience. It's not one of those situations where it's what are we going to do? We're shit out of luck here. We got to get some guys that are going to be able to really play at this level. I think they feel like they've got 3 guys who can really play at this level at guard. So my number one thing that I'm really watching is, as far as offense, is going to be at the tight end position.
Yeah, a couple things. Like Cuevas and Lewis have been pretty limited, and that's to be expected. They had some injuries they're dealing with in the spring, but it has been – I know, and I've said it in practice reports, I try to quell things on the message board whenever we post things. But, like, when you look at the order, like, they're trusting Marshall Pritchett to go out there and lead that group at times. And he's added a lot of good weight, and he's a guy that could be a factor as a true freshman. I still think, like, Brody Dalton coming in as a fifth-year senior, he's played at UAB, he's played at Troy. It makes a lot of sense. Still, I guess, learning the system a little bit. But that is a group that I'm fascinated by. But with that offensive line, I'll set you up because we haven't talked about it on the show. But I'm glad you said what you said, because that's something that people don't take into account. It's like, maybe it's a good problem to have. You have 3 experienced offensive linemen at those interior spots. You're having to replace a first-round draft pick and Tyler Booker. Now, granted, Cam Dewberry has kind of been solid at left guard. It's been the right guard spot that's been rotating. Now, we know that Jaden Roberts has battled injuries. He's kind of done that for a while now, but he also needs to be more consistent at that position. And a player that they trust to come in and provide that consistency is Geno Vandemark. So it's not necessarily a sky is falling type scenario for the offensive line. I think it's great that we're not hearing anything about right tackle so far throughout the preseason. But what are your thoughts on this overall? I know you touched on it a little bit, but we might as well talk about it again.
With Geno, this is a guy that's been with Coach Cap for 3 or 4 years. Coach Cap recruited Geno to Michigan State, so there's he knows everything about him. This is going to be, I think this is Geno's final year. So he wants to get a chance. He wants an opportunity to be out there and to get looked at as far as a potential NFL draft pick one day. But I think they really like Geno. I was told after the spring that Dewberry was one of the they liked Dewberry, when he transferred to Texas A&M, but after seeing him a little bit more and being up close and personal with him, watching him go through the spring, they said this was one of the best steals that we could have ever imagined coming in and potentially making a starting impact role for Alabama. And that's another guy who's had a lot of experience playing in the SEC, as a starter, but also as a high quality backup over in College Station. So that's going to be an interesting competition. Who ends up, really getting in that starting role? But with Geno, you also have a guy that can play either guard spot or center if you really need him to. I think the biggest question I have is, who's going to be the backup at left and right tackle? Because right now, it certainly looks like it's going to be, it could be Jackson Lloyd and Michael Carroll at those 2 spots. You have Olas, who worked at left tackle during the spring, they talk very highly of him, but Michael Carroll and Jackson Lloyd certainly getting a lot of reps there and could potentially be that second guy going into the season. And you want to stay healthy throughout the year. You also want to get those guys as many reps as you possibly can during this fall practice, just in case they're going to be thrown into the fire.
No, I think both of those guys have the true freshmen, Lloyd and Carroll, have received some high praise from the coaches throughout the preseason. But it's kind of I'm interested to see what that first depth chart will look like, and I'm sure we'll get that 3 hours before kick when we get up in the press box on Saturday in Tallahassee.
A lot of oars.
Yeah, but even if it does say like Lloyd and Carroll on the second line, like it could be Olas as the first guy off the bench if something were to happen, just because they trust him a little more. But that is something that I think is fascinating to see play out. But for me, like when you talk about questions or maybe even concerns, it's special teams. Like we feel probably pretty good that David Byrd will be the guy at long snapper, the transfer from Cal. He has experience. If you just go off of his bio from Cal, he hasn't had an errant snap in the past 2 years. That's something you like to see. Yeah, pretty efficient there. But there's some walk-ons that are kind of rotating there as well. I think Alex Rozier and Jay Williams are a couple names that have gotten some run. And Jay Williams is a guy that actually traveled with Alabama to some road games last year. So not just a pushover by any means. I think Connor Talty has a good hold on the place kicking responsibilities. Now, I didn't hear a ton from a kicking standpoint on Saturday. Talking to Jay Nunez at Media Day, we were both there, as well as Blake Byler. He told me that Connor Talty was either right at or right under 90% through the first week or so of fall camp. So and that's not just chip shots. They've been challenging these guys. So I think he's done a nice job, but needs to continue to get better. And the punter, I mean, Blake Dowd comes in from Colorado School of Mines, had a so-so spring. And then Alex Asparuhoff, the true freshman, didn't really do much in the spring at all because of injury. So those are your guys that are battling it out. Haven't heard really much one way or the other, good or bad, about the punters, but that's something. We still have a ton of interviews to go before game week that we can hit on with the coaches. But
you hope to not use them.
Yeah, that would be a nice thing. Like, yeah, if it's just Connor Talty kicking extra points and kicking off, that would be a great season for Alabama. But we know how important an efficient punter can be for a team. And I know we've talked about it a lot on this show. Like, Kalen DeBoer just speaks so highly of James Burnap and what he was from a consistency and a productivity standpoint that'll be tough to replace regardless. So we'll see how it goes. I guess we'll get out of here on this. We'll kind of go back and forth a little bit here if we want to, but what have been your biggest surprises from a player standpoint, from a position standpoint? Any of the young guys jump out to you so far in preseason camp?
Yeah, from talking to some of the players the other day during media day, and I'll throw out a couple of just names that a lot of people haven't really talked about. QB Reese, an inside linebacker. We talked about the inside linebacker room and how good it is with those first three guys, but who are going to be the kind of that next wave. We know about Caden Jones, but Quay Russo the other day talked about QB Reese. QB was, he was one of those guys that was kind of one of the last scholarship offers for Coach Saban. Came in a little bit later last year, but played a lot on special teams, and we're starting to see some positive feedback on him. And what Quay said is he has been one of the most consistent players on the defensive side of the ball. Brings it every single day, and we're going to talk. I've got a story coming out with Quay who talks a little bit more about QB, but he also mentioned Yanze Pierre. This is a highly regarded player that came in a couple years ago, 5-star recruit. Was seen as potentially a guy similar to Will Anderson, and he came in. Obviously, defense changed a little bit. He was still in that kind of 230-pound frame range. Now he's 250, and Quay said, this is a guy who was always really good and always quick off the ball, but now he's starting to understand the defense a lot more, and really smart and understands the plays, and has really kind of come on. So you can have some depth at that Wolf position because Quay, as good as he is, and as Kane Womack mentioned, freakiest guy on the team, which I was hoping he meant on the field or in the weight room, and that's
TBD.
But I think that you can have some really good depth, some guys that can come in and really affect the quarterback. Regardless if they're putting them on the ground, but if you're getting back there and chasing this guy around or chasing the quarterback around, that's going to be good as far as having some depth at that Wolf position. So hearing more about Yanze starting to really come around and come to his own, I think that's been really positive.
Yeah, they need a lot from that group this fall because obviously Quay's back. He needs to get more sacks and be more productive in that area. But Jamarian Latham's a 6-year senior. He knows what to do out there. But you have a guy like Justin Hill coming in who looks like $1 million out on the practice field. It's good that we've heard a lot about Yanze and even Noah Carter, that he's not quite passing them up yet, because it's a small group. That's 5 scholarship players. That's all that's out there. They have I think Lane Wisenhunt is the 6th man. That's a walk-on. But it's a small group to watch out there in the practice field. But I think they got some promising prospects there. And with QB, I think it's funny, or not. That's not funny, but like guys like Quay and Tim Keenan, guys that are from the state of Alabama, I think they know a little bit more about QB and maybe his story, and I think they're really rooting for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like Tim Keenan back at SEC Media Days spoke a lot about QB Reese. He even talked about him back in the spring as well. So when you look at that inside backer room, you know who the top 3 guys are. And a lot of the times when we've been out there, they've been split up into like 2 different groups. So you have the 3 seniors, and it'll either be Caden Jones or QB Reese, and then the other one will be with the 3 freshmen, and they kind of flip back and forth because Caden Jones is a big dude out there, but QB Reese is holding his on too. But for me, I guess from a surprise standpoint, we talked about him a little bit, but a guy like Daniel Hill, the fact that he keeps getting mentioned over and over again, and sometimes is the guy that's mentioned right after Jam Miller, says a lot, because I think we expect big things from Richard Young, but it kind of sounds more and more like Daniel Hill is kind of pushing for some running back 2 reps this fall. And so they've got experienced players. Jam Miller's a senior. Jay Washington is going into his last year. Richard Young's been in the program. But going into year 2, Daniel Hill seems like a real contender for some playing time. Like a guy like Rico Scott, that's been kind of consistent throughout the spring. But a guy like Daniel Hill, he's kind of climbing his way up that pecking order and continues to be mentioned. So I did want to ask you, though, like with guys like Rico, Daniel Hill, you obviously followed them during their recruitment. When we're talking about surprises, does it surprise you to hear their names mentioned kind of going into year 2 of the program?
I think with Rico, not necessarily that. I mean, he was, I thought, one of the more underrated players in the country coming out of his senior year, because he wasn't a top 100 guy. He was in that 4-star range, but kind of on the back end of the 4-star range. And I remember he was offered by Alabama before his junior season, and talking to one of the staff members back then, he said, this was a kid who ran the fastest 40 time in Alabama's camp, not just one camp, the entire summer. So we've known about his speed for a long time, and we knew he was a physical guy, little kind of a stockier type player. But I think Alabama had high expectations for him a few years ago when they recruited him. Daniel Hill, probably a little surprising as far as how quickly he's kind of moved up the depth chart. I mean, 200, you look at him, he kind of looks like a linebacker. I mean, he doesn't necessarily look like and I'm not saying people looked at him coming out of high school as, this is going to be a linebacker in college. I think they looked at him as, is he going to be a running back? Is he potentially going to be a fullback? Could he grow into that, an H-back type role? But he's really shown off. He's got great speed, even at that 244 pounds. So that brings a different level. I mean, I remember when he was a senior, and even before then, there was a kid that had visited Alabama 40 times, it seemed like, between his sophomore and senior season. It always seemed like that's where he wanted to go. His father played at Mississippi State. But South Carolina really made a substantial run at him. They thought they were going to get him. There were predictions in August for him to commit there. I think he had like an August 27th commitment date. Decided to hold off. Wait a little bit longer, waited all the way until he actually signed with Alabama during that early signing period, but announced it at the All-American Bowl in January. So, and looking back at it, there were some other guys that Alabama had been recruiting, including Nate Frazier, who was over at Georgia, and then late in the process, Jaden Ball, who they felt like it was about to commit. He ends up going to Florida. Alabama had flipped Kevin Riley from Tuscaloosa County, kind of the day or two before signing day, and you just weren't sure exactly what Daniel Hill was going to do. There was a lot of talk about Mississippi State, and I remember somebody the day of the early signing period, the first day, one of the Mississippi State writers put him in at 90. Usually we do like 60 or 65%.
Yeah.
Just to not really give anything away. We're just like, oh, we feel good about it. Let's just do 60, 65%. But we don't want to give them 90%. When the Mississippi State writers put them at 90% to Mississippi State that
Yeesh.
day. And Tim and I knew that the kid had committed or signed with Alabama that they were like, oh, that's going to look bad on him in a few weeks. But maybe he changed it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, he's certainly been a pleasant surprise, and both of those guys have certainly earned it.
Well, good stuff, man. We'll have to do this more often. I enjoyed this conversation.
Sure,
but we what is this? This is Sunday was practice 10. They're off on Monday. And so we got 10 more of these to go before game week. So be sure to lock in to BamaOnLine. What is it right now? 1 week for $1. And then you get a full year access if you're a new member to the Athletic. It's a great deal. And then I know we've noted, it's been on the message board, On3 is adding national talent left and right. I don't think they're done. I think Josh Pate put out his first video on Sunday night, kind of under the On3 umbrella. You add Ross Dellinger. It's a great place to be right now, and we'll continue to cover fall camp extensively, exclusively. And so we'll see you guys on the next show.